welcome to the video. This one's going to be a video review of Broadway Limited's Paragon 3 Pennsylvania M1b steam engine. This one's a post-1946 version. It has synchronized puffing smoke as well as the Paragon 3 DCC and DC sound system. So we'll go ahead and check out the details on this engine, listen to how it sounds, check out the puffing synchronized smoke, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the actual Pennsylvania M1Bs and how this model compares to the actual ones. And then we'll look at the pulling power of this one, which, similar to all the other BLI engines I've reviewed, is outstanding. So with that, let's go ahead and get to the unboxing.
Unboxing of the engine was fairly straightforward. It does come with BLI's standard literature, and this one is a little bit older style packaging that BLI uses instead of the new one that they've got in some of the Paragon 3 engines. This one did have one issue. The front of the smoke box was popped off. It happened in transit or something, but really wasn't a problem. It snapped back into place and then was fine from then on. Slow speed performance of the engine was outstanding. At speed step 1 on my DCC system, the engine crawled forward at 0.6 miles an hour, although I did notice a little bit of hesitation and a little bit of stuttering with the at that slow of a speed, and so I went ahead and increased to speed step 5, and even then it still crawled forward without any hesitation, and it was nice and smooth at that point. I measured my engine's top speed at about 58 scale miles an hour, which is a little slower than the M1B's 70 mile an hour top speed. The synchronized puffing smoke on the engine worked quite well and produces a nice effect chuffing along with the sound of the engine in time with the drivers and things. It is white and a little bit wispy. My mind, it doesn't look exactly like the real steam engines and the amount of smoke that they belch out, but it does produce a nice effect. One item to note, though, is you want to make sure that you never run this engine or any of your smoking steam engines with the smoke unit on unless you have smoke fluid in it, or else you could damage the unit. On this engine, you can actually turn the smoke off on two different ways. The first of which is there's a mechanical switch on the underside, which you can just switch off. If you want to use it, it does have to be in the on position, but then it can electronically be turned off with F7. You can turn it off and on. One thing I'll go ahead and point out here is if you're ever wondering sort of whether your smoke unit is on or not, because sometimes the toggle switches on your DCC systems don't actually reflect the actual status of the mechanism. You can actually hear that if you mute your engine and then put your ear right down next to the engine. You can actually hear a little clicking. And I've amplified it here. It's normally not that loud, but that little bit of clicking sound, that's the actual fan and heater element in the engine. And so you can mute your engine and listen for that, and you can tell whether it's on or not, regardless if it's smoking or not. The performance of the engine was excellent, and I didn't have any issues with it running through any parts of my layout. Here I've got it backing through a curved number 7 switch and then through 2 number 6s, and didn't have any issues at all. And then also here it is going forwards and backwards through my double crossover. And again, if you're not familiar with my layout, all of these switches they have insulated frogs on them. They're Insul frog switches, and no issues observed at all. No stalling or intermittent clicks of the sound or anything going through the switches at all. Okay, now that we've seen how this performs, let's go ahead and listen to the Paragon 3 sound system as we check out the details on this engine.
I am clear to set on first, correct?
Yes, sir. You're clear to set on. Then we'll find out how many cars you come first. Okay. 4 tower.
If you guys need it, we'll make it work, over.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Permission to enter Form D 141244.
All right.
The Pennsy used its 300 M-Class 482 mountain locomotives in both freight and passenger service, though during the end of their life they were used almost exclusively in freight service. Originally built in the 20s and 30s, in 1946 Pennsy took 41 of their M1As and converted them into M1b locomotives. The modifications that Pennsy made increased the tractive effort of the M1As from 64,550 pounds to the M1B's tractive effort of 69,700 pounds. I found that Broadway Limited's M1b locomotive to be an extremely accurate reproduction of the actual Pennsy M1Bs. However, there were a couple little things that I did wanted to point out, as well as the things I really liked about the engine. While most of the engine is molded extremely fine and looks very crisp, the front air tank on the engine has a very noticeable mold line on it. And comparing that to the air tank on the actual Pennsylvania 6755, which is an M1B stored at the museum in Strasbourg, you can see that mold line is not there on the air tank at all. One other issue I noted with the engine, although this is actually very minor and kind of nitpicky, and it's something I noticed on one of their other engines too, is that the bell is very free swinging, and so they've got this nice metal brass bell hanging on top of the engine, but it swings around and moves and vibrates as the engine's going around, even at a nice, slow, steady, even speed, and it's just kind of distracting to my eye. One of the things you may have noticed on the model is that the red on the roof of the engine is different than the red that's on the tender of the engine, and that is actually correct. That's how Pennsy did it. They had different color of red on there. And I think BLI did a really great job capturing the Brunswick green color of the Pennsy steam engines. It's almost black, but not quite. It's just got a little bit of green into it. Pennsy actually referred to that color as dark green locomotive enamel, but most people I know just call it Brunswick green. You also notice that the front of the engine has a keystone with the number of the engine on it rather than a circle. That's because, again, this was a dual service engine, and they had the keystones on the front of the smoke boxes for all their engines that pulled passenger trains versus the ones that only were designated for freight service had circles on them. But all the M1 A's and B's had the keystones because they were dual service engines. And in case you're wondering about all the additional rivets and some of the piping that's on the prototype photos of 6755s that is not on the model engine, that's because the prototype was actually undergoing restoration at the time I took the photographs, and so some of the outer skin of the locomotive had been peeled away and was not there. And so that's why you see some of those additional rivets and piping that's not on the models and that you normally don't see. One thing that I forgot to mention earlier was the pulling power of this engine is fantastic. I found on my layout that the engine would easily pull 100 cars around the layout. That is on level track, but it was through about 720 degrees of curve. And one final item. You may have noticed in a lot of the video of the engine going around my layout that the front light on the engine is not illuminated. That's actually because Pennsy normally did not have the light on unless the engine was running at night or it was foggy or in bad weather or something and the engineer felt he needed the light. But they were not mandated to be on until just the last couple years of steam locomotive running. And so for most of the lifespan of steam engines, they did not have the lights on during the day. All right, and with that, I think I'll go ahead and wrap up this review. In summary, I think this is another fantastic engine from Broadway Limited. It's got great pulling power. It's got very good details. It's highly accurate when comparing to the prototype, and is a very smooth running engine. So with that, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you liked the review and found this useful. Stay tuned for future videos and keep watching the channel. And don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, keep running your trains and keep enjoying them.